you can imagine when you have a ton of like super spiritual conversations like that when you're 15 and also just like humming with sexual energy, like you better believe as boyfriend and girlfriend, we were starting to do some stuff. And I shit you guys not, literally the day after, like we were making out and we started doing stuff we weren't supposed to. The day after I woke up and my purity ring had cracked.
Welcome to another episode of Growing Up Christian. I'm Sam.
And I'm Casey.
And the other week, Casey, I had FaceTimed you because I had some stuff I wanted to go over. A couple things to talk about. And it was really good timing because you had just gotten, I don't know, I think I'm going to take this back a step. As everybody knows, and if you don't, that's your problem. You need to go back and listen to it. But we had Casey's wife, April, on the podcast for Friday Fellowship or Fellowship Friday. Which one do we do? How do we call it? I mix it up.
I think it's Friday Fellowship.
Friday Fellowship. And I corrected you on it, and I was wrong. So I looked like an asshole, and people got to listen to that. So that's fun.
We'll just switch it every episode.
So, you know, your wife does the cosplay. Your wife. She has a name. Now it looks like April. I'm using distancing language. I don't know. All the sociologists and psychologists can explain to me what just happened there. But so she had received a message from someone while I was talking to you, maybe to her inbox, one of them on the socials. And you, I caught you at the right time because you had her phone in your hand and it was a guy wondering if she does dick reviews. Which is a thing.
Apparently, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Like, that's supposedly, especially on OnlyFans, that's like a huge thing that a lot of girls do. But girls that do it explicitly say, I do these. Not for free, not for fun, but for money. Yeah. They will do them. You know? So it's like, it's kind of a shot in the dark and not real cool to just lob your picture at an unsuspecting lady, or man for that matter.
Now it does come through blurred out. It's like they recognize that content is not for everybody, and it was blurred out. So, but I just was excited. I had the privilege of being on FaceTime at the time. So Casey's like, "Hey, do you want to see this picture?" And he explained to me the situation. I was like, "Fuck it, yeah, this sounds like fun." So we clicked that we wanted to see the image, and
it was like an unboxing video.
Yeah, it was just like super tatted up dude. He had like a tattoo all the way down his what do you call those porn lines or cum gutters, depending on
yeah. It stretched onto his backboard.
Yeah. And it was just interesting. I mean, you know, he was just standing there with an erect dick, and that was new for me to just be like, "Oh, this is a world that people live in where you would look at that and get paid to go 6 out of 10."
Yeah, that's fine.
And you gotta have confidence going into that, man. You have to have a real level of confidence, being like, because if you think you have a 2. I mean, you're probably not going to send it in, right? No one wants to hear. Well, maybe.
Yeah. Well, I mean, unless humiliation is the thing. Yeah. Some people like to be humiliated and mocked, but I feel like that's another separate lane that you have to find somebody in that lane before you do that too.
Yeah. Yeah.
This guy had a giant tattoo of an elephant on his stomach, and that kind of extended down onto the backboard region. And I was telling my buddy about this last night. And he's like, "So was his dong the trunk?" And I was like, "No, it wasn't." And how do you come that close to like such an eternally good punchline,
right,
and not go for it?
I don't know. I mean, he missed a seriously good opportunity there. And speaking of missing seriously good opportunities, we don't want to do that. So we were thinking that in order to grow this platform,
I feel like we had the exact opposite conversation before we pressed start.
What?
Yeah, I mean, hey, look, it's not going to be our bread and butter, but we'll take a look.
No, that's what I'm getting at. We don't want to miss an opportunity here to, I don't know, we're trying to grow something here, right? And I think a good way to do that is to start our own dick review. We can offer dick reviews. And I would say we're probably more impartial judges.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, we're not overwhelmed with them, So like it's an occasional treat.
Yeah, I would say if you want an honest opinion, a truly honest opinion, look, if you're paying somebody for it, they're going to be like, "Wow, that's a great dick, 10 out of 10," and you're going to go home and feel happy. Look, pressure's off. It's not sexual. If you're just genuinely curious about your dick, then we'll rate it for you and we will give you an honest opinion. So we're gonna get into that opportunity. Maybe we'll make our own OnlyFans just for that. And I don't know. We'll see. We'll see where this
Yeah.
goes. We might be posting some links.
It's an avenue we're exploring.
Yeah.
We're not there yet. We don't have the infrastructure in place yet for the multitude of pecker picks that we'll probably get.
Yeah, we're probably gonna get a bunch of dick pics now. That's my fear. Is that our inbox is just gonna get blown up with dick pics and just off a joke.
Hey, if it's obviously not yours, we're gonna have to ban you too. So have some integrity.
Yeah, we're all about integrity. That's why we really are doing this to begin with, because integrity is important to us. We want to speak our truth. So
Judeo-Christian values.
Exactly. So that was a fun place to start. We've now anyone who stumbled across us for the first time knows what we're about now, and we've
successfully pigeonholed ourselves.
Get a couple of bad reviews off of this. So let's see. Let's jump over to you, Casey, because you just got back from vacation the other day, and you were out traveling the country for a little bit. We did our last intro from your vacation, and you only just got back, so you're a busy guy.
Yeah, we kind of spur of the moment decided to go north and west. So we went to the Black Hills for a few days, which is where we were when we did the last intro. It was pretty fun. Went to Badlands National Park, which is real cool. Weird desert setting. Used to be underwater millions of years ago. Just an interesting place.
How many years ago? Sorry.
Well, supposedly millions of years ago. Of course, we all know that it happened during the Great Flood, which was 400 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And, all fossils made at the same time or else put there by God to test our faith.
Yes. Okay, so continue. Now, I just wanted to get that out of the way.
Yeah, we got like 30 yards from a massive bighorn sheep, the big curly horns,
Oh, yeah.
Those are way bigger than I thought. Like, those are small. They're I thought of them as like a domestic goat would be what it would look like. They're huge. I mean, they're like very large. So that was cool to see. We went to misadventure. When I was doing the intros we had an Airbnb in Lead, South Dakota, which is up in the mountains. I had booked the thing for, I don't know, like 4 nights or something like that. I had originally booked it for 5. And when I went back to actually like confirm it, somebody else had already booked it for like the last night that we were planning on being there.
Oh, man.
So I had to change our plans. I guess I did not mentally note that we were staying there one fewer night than I had originally thought. So we get up the last day that we're supposed to be there, last full day or whatever, and we drive like an hour and 45 minutes south to Wind Cave National Park, which is apparently like one of the biggest cave systems in the world. And you can go down and explore it and go through a whole bunch of things. It looked really cool. We bought tickets to go into the cave. Yeah, it was looked like it would have been great, but we buy tickets and stuff, go out and start hiking. We get like a mile from the car, and I get a phone call, and it's the lady from the Airbnb, and she's like, Hey, just wanted to check with you. The cleaning folks stopped by the apartment, and your stuff's still there.
Oh my god.
I'm like, Yeah, yeah, it will be until tomorrow." And she's like, "No, last night was your last night, and I've got people coming in this afternoon."
Oh
So
no.
so we're like, "Oh my god!" So we turn around and like sprint back to the truck, like a mile, jump in, drive like another hour and 45 minutes back to the apartment, slam all of our stuff into the suitcases and everything, and then like, we're out of the place within like 3 hours of her call, probably 2.5 hours. So that was a mess. We didn't
That
get to really
sucks.
see Wind Cave.
Yeah, that's a bummer. Did you she give you a bad review?
No, she was super cool about it. I apologized up and down. I'm like, look, I'm going to leave the apartment in amazing shape so that there's just really the laundry to do. So we did that, and so she was real cool about it. She's like, I won't let this affect your rating. So
Oh, that's
nice
good.
lady. But so we didn't have anywhere to stay that night, so we decided we'd just like head towards Wyoming, which is where we were going to spend the rest of the week. Went to Devil's Tower,
What's that?
which you got to Google it. It's weird, man. It's like in the middle of nowhere in like northeast Wyoming. There's just this giant pillar of rock sticking up above everything else around it. It's
Weird.
huge, and it's made of like these 8-foot columns of solid rock that apparently everything else around it like washed away, and then volcanic activity or seismic activity like pushed this to the surface. So it's just
Huh.
like this giant pedestal in the middle of nowhere.
That's pretty cool. Can
Yeah,
you
it was
climb it?
interesting.
Is it like, or is it just a look at it? There's no way up it.
I think people do climb it with like actual mountain climbing gear,
Okay.
but it's like sheer cliff all the way around it. So I mean, there's no walking to the top or anything. I mean, it was cool, but we went into Wyoming, dude. Okay, I gotta say, Wyoming is fantastic. No one talks about Wyoming, but that place is great.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, like we went all the way across the eastern side. We went to we stayed the first night in Buffalo, Wyoming, and then the rest of the week we stayed in Sheridan. Tiny little towns in the middle of the range at the foothills of the Bighorn Mountains. And it's just a great place. Like the towns are like super clean, well kept up. Everybody like the downtown area is like bustling all the times, tons of restaurants, all sorts of cool outdoor stuff to do. Man, the whole time we were there, I'm like, this place is incredible. Like,
Huh.
why aren't more small towns like these? Because these are just great.
That's pretty cool. And especially like no one go like, well, you do. I mean, you'll just check out new places, do things, but like a lot of people aren't going to do that. It's like there's probably so many neat like small towns in the Midwest, right? That no one will ever go to.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of crappy ones. I will say that.
Yeah, you probably have to like weed through a lot of terrible ones before you'd find one that was worth it. It's just that's
there's
why no one finds them. You
there's
just
definitely
wait.
like an archetype for towns in the Great Plains region where you like drive into town. There's not a single business that's either open or in good shape. Like they're all dilapidated. All the houses are torn apart, but they have at least 1 to 2 really nice, immaculate churches and 1 to 2 really nice, immaculate banks.
Yeah,
The rest of the town is in ruins.
and everyone has to go. Everyone goes to the like a couple of the. There's like a. I mean, if they don't go to that church, there may be like another one or two they go to. But, dude, actually thinking about that. So obviously we were in Lynchburg, Virginia for a while with Liberty University, and there's churches like literally everywhere. I mean,
Everywhere.
you can't go more than 15 feet without coming into a church. And a lot of them are started by people who graduate from Liberty. And I think what's funny is, everyone has this missional mindset, right? And then they go to Liberty and they want to become a pastor, they want to be a church planner, and they study for 4 years. And as they're there, they all seem to have this unique idea of, even though this is a really Christian area and there's so much access to the gospel, it's also like really dark. And a lot of people just haven't heard. And they don't, it's like, and they start another church because they feel compelled to invest in the community that they've called home for 4 years. I'm like, yeah, this is your college town. Like, move on, find a new place. Like, I find that so fascinating. The amount, while I was there, well, like there was probably three, four, maybe five, like trendy churches that like were all started by people who had graduated Liberty or were still at Liberty. And, I know some people now who have churches there. And I mean, a lot of people stay there, and I know there's a lot of people. So, like, I don't know. But I do think it gets a little bit played out when people want to start that many churches in an area that's saturated with churches.
Yeah, I really don't get it. Like, I remember back when we were graduating from Liberty, one of the kids that was he wasn't a friend, but he was kind of around. I remember he was going to like Las Vegas or something to do a church plant.
Yes,
And
I knew. I wonder if it's probably the same one I knew about. I knew like three people who took off to Vegas to be part of a church plant out there.
I bet you anything it's one of them. But I was like,
and it was named
why?
Grace or Hope or something like that. It's like I feel like it was something like, I don't know. Forget it.
It's weird because, like, on the one hand, last week with Karina, she talked about her church that she grew up in, and it's really more of like a community service group in a lot of ways than like a church. And in that way I could see, okay, yeah, I get it. I mean, that makes sense. That seems like a good thing to do for people. Maybe it's not the rich spiritual environment that some people are looking for, but it's a sense, it's a community and a place where you can do some good things and feel good about yourself,
Yeah.
like that kind of church planning. I guess that's whatever. But yeah, for the most part, I just go, why another one? Like, why do you want to do that again?
Yeah. And to me, it's like, it has to do with a conflicting mindset for me. Like the mindset that the people have going into it, I feel like it doesn't match the outcome. Like their intention doesn't match their, I don't know. There's a dissonance there that bothers me a little bit, because it's like, if you're starting it because you think you need to reach people and that you're going to offer something that nobody else has, that comes with a degree of hubris for sure. But at the same time, like, if you start something that evolves out of just a group of people who find themselves connecting and they have a meaningful connection and they want to create that space to do that thing, then I don't really care about that. I mean, that's the like, so when I moved back to Massachusetts from Virginia, like I've mentioned before, that I moved to Boston for a bit to be part of a church plant. And that church got some money from, like, it wasn't a Southern Baptist church, but basically was. I mean, because they were getting money from the Southern Baptist Convention or Southern Baptist
Okay.
denomination. So when you're getting money from those churches, you do have to sign something that basically, in effect, you won't teach anything against what they would say. And like the pastors have to sign something saying they won't drink and follow all their rules. So even though you're not Southern Baptist, you are. I mean, you lose that money at least. So one of the things that would come out is, if as a Southern Baptist, like from the Southern Baptist think tank group, I don't know, whatever you, I don't really want to call it that, but they'll say that, like, Boston is considered an unreached people group when it comes to the amount of saved people, right? Yeah, and that's the language they use.
Yeah, I've heard that language applied to like tribes in New Guinea. I've never heard it applied to Boston.
Right. Now, I know you've been to Boston, but maybe not really driven through it. I'm not sure how much you've like.
I've been to Lynn.
Boston. Oh, well, okay. It doesn't.
And it sucked.
Yeah, it's not great there. So Boston is like this church is everywhere, dude. Everywhere. The problem is they're Catholic churches.
Oh, well,
And that's not
yeah, that
Christian.
doesn't count.
It doesn't count. So they actually will I mean, when they determine whether or not a space is an unreached people group, they base it on um can you hear my kids screaming? I don't know.
Just a little.
Yeah, their bedroom is right above me, so we'll have to deal with that for probably a few more minutes. Um, where was I? Oh, so they determine it based on like boxes checked, right? Like if they're doing a survey of an area and then, like people are generally like non-committal to the the theology of the Southern Baptist Church, or they won't use the same type of rhetoric or check the right theological boxes. They will say you are they'll call it like these people don't have the gospel. As defined by the Southern Baptists. So Massachusetts or Boston particularly is considered an unreached people group, even though there's like mainline Protestant and Catholic churches everywhere. I mean, everyone grew up Catholic. Everyone's Catholic and to some degree. If you aren't practicing, your parents are, but that means like you've had access to it. And like, but they want to pretend like these people have never even heard the name of Jesus. And you're like, that's not true. They say his
Yeah.
name all the time. Jesus Christ. Jesus fucking
That's like
Christ. That's how
this guy
it's here in
that
Boston.
there's this guy that wanted to go into missions at my church, and it's a whole thing. But anyways, I remember like it started out as like we want to go to the jungle and translate the Bible and stuff. Okay,
Yeah.
great, And then he ended up getting married. His wife had some health problems, couldn't do that. So they finally like settled on we're gonna go to Spain, right? And I remember him giving this presentation, talking about their mission and what they were planning to do in Spain, and he's talking about just like how lost the country
Yeah.
of Spain is, and he gets up and he's like going through all these statistics, same sort of thing, unreached people group, everything. He goes, and you just see the signs of it everywhere. He goes, one of the most popular songs in Spain is it has these lyrics that go, oh man, I can't remember the words to it, but I've done this, I've blah 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 blah, but I still haven't found what I'm looking for. And I was
Okay.
sitting there thinking of him like, did he just quote a U2 song as a reason to go to Spain?
Oh my God.
You know what some of this is, though? Like the church planting thing. So, again, I work in the automotive industry. So I work with a lot of repair shops and car dealerships and things like that. There's a lot of really good, like independent repair shops out there. And then there's some really not good ones. And a lot of times what you find is that this guy who was working at a dealership or another shop, he just cannot work for anyone else because he's dramatic or demanding or just a pain in the butt or can't show up on time or whatever. And so like after like the fifth place that he can't conform to the policies and stuff, he's like, I'm going to start my own shop.
Yeah.
That's what I'm going to do. I'm sick of all this garbage. I'm going to start my own shop. So like he'll just open a shop, regardless of how many of them are scattered around him or how bleak the prospect of actually like getting a new business off the ground is, how little he knows about starting a business and running a business.
Right.
He's just like, I know how to fix cars. I'll just start a shop. And I think there's a lot of that in that church world too, where it's like, I want to be the center of attention. I want to do it my way. And so I'm not going to go work for a church for a while. Like I'm going to go start my own.
Yeah, it's more, well, it's not financially lucrative. I mean, it can be depending on how you do it. Usually, I would say for most people starting a church, they don't have dreams of making a ton of money. And I know pastors are often, you know, they get shit on a lot for that. And there's a lot of pastors making a lot of money when your church starts growing and you start just raking it in. That's a huge problem. And I will criticize those people endlessly. I think, just to be fair, I think most people who are starting churches do not have any intention of really making money off of it. I think they all go into it knowing pretty much that they're going to struggle financially for a while.
Yeah. I
So,
mean, there's
like
a lot of
any
good people that
entrepreneur,
start those things too. I mean,
certainly,
we're painting with a broad brush.
of
It's just
course,
like growing up, you meet people and you see trends and you start to like you just see poor representations of a given, group or life path or whatever else, and it,
right.
it kind of makes you suspicious over time, I guess.
Yeah. And sometimes I am not going to downplay the hubris of people who think, I do have, like, I've heard it from these people and I've been to this church and I've heard, like, I've been around the Christian world and I've heard it given this way and that. And I just think I think I can say it in a way that's going to be different. And of course it's going to resonate with some people and people are going to go there, but there is a bit of hubris to starting a church when your theology is identical to the theology of many churches in your area and just doing one in that same spot. I just think that's weird. I don't But if
You
someone
know
wants
what,
to try
bro?
and convince me it's not, I would love to hear their argument.
We're living in extreme days right now. And sometimes they just need you to come at them like a whirlwind.
Yeah, just double, just like saturate. You just got to saturate the market because that's what's going to do it for people. It's like they walked by 15 churches and they felt that whisper of God, but when they walked past our church, the 16th church, that's when God spoke to them and they walked in and they got saved right then and there. So beautiful stories.
All right, so let's go ahead and introduce our guest for this week because this was a fun episode. We just had we did
It
a
was
couple of
fun.
episodes in a row where we got done and we're just like, man, that was just like that. That did not feel like we were talking for like an hour and a half. Like it was just a ton of fun hanging out with a couple of
Yeah.
the new people that we've got coming up, and Stephen Henning is one of those.
Yeah, Stephen, he's got he's one of a few hosts for a podcast that he's been doing. It's a theology podcast called Ravel. He has another podcast that he's been doing for a little while. They get, I think they're on episode 60 now, called No Normal People, which is, I was on a couple weeks back. We shared that in our story back when the episode came out, but he'll talk about that. Definitely check out his that podcast there, and then he's got a third podcast. He's an avid podcaster called the Whiskey Bench Podcast. So he'll get into all of those and give, when we close out, he'll give an idea of what all of those are. And they all part of a podcast network that him and his co-podcasters have created called the Highline Network. And he's a neat guy. He's a lot of fun, and just listen to him and you'll know why he's got a few podcasts. He's got a good voice for it and a good personality. And it was just fun talking to him. Very relaxed, fun environment. He's got some funny stories to share. So we're definitely excited for you guys to listen to this one.
Yeah, if you didn't listen to the episode of No Normal People, which is KNOW Normal People, that Sam was on, it was really fun to listen to. Definitely go back and check that out.
Yeah.
And as always, if you like what you're hearing, we would appreciate it if you'd leave a review on iTunes, share with a friend. I think a lot of you guys have been doing that recently, and it's really cool, man. It's cool to know that we just got a good group, I feel like, going. And the Discord is the place where you want to be a part of the group, you want to interact, talk about things, post funny stuff, comment on the episodes and things. Just share your thoughts with us and with everybody else that's involved. You can find the links to that in our social media. And without further ado, enjoy our conversation with Stephen Henning.
Hey, everybody. We're back with our guest, Stephen Henning. Stephen, thanks so much for hanging out with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. See, I kind of feel like we're already a little bit of friends.
I absolutely feel that way.
Yeah.
Yes.
So for our listeners, I started connecting with Stephen a little bit through and we'll get to it in a little bit more detail towards the end after we hear a little bit about Stephen's life. But he's got a podcast called Ravel. It talks about different theologies and kind of goes in all different directions. But they post questions and do some like try to, like any podcast, get people to interact with them through their Instagram page. And I would just find myself interacting from time to time and going back and forth with Steven. And I think it's Josh. Is it Josh? Is that the other guy?
Yeah, my
Okay.
co-hosts are Josh Llewellyn and Emily Reddinghouse.
Okay.
Yep.
So going back and forth with you guys, and then I ended up doing your. I saw that you guys have your another one of your podcasts, No Normal People. Did that, and so over the past year, we've just kind of been going back and forth on Instagram, and then we recently connected on your podcast, and now you're here. So it's cool to have you.
I'm happy to do the trade-off. Sam, it was so much fun to have you on our show and get to know you. There are moments in our conversation from that have been just kind of like spinning in my head for weeks now afterward.
Oh, that's cool. That makes me feel good about myself. I got what I came for. This is good. Thanks.
Fantastic. Yeah. Episode over. We're good. Have a good weekend.
Yeah. Everyone take it easy. We'll see you next time. Steven, why don't you just kind of give us a snapshot of your life? Start as far back as you want and whatever kind of upbringing you had. Go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I did a little bit of growing up in my earliest years in Brighton, Colorado. And my dad was, and still is actually, he works for the FAA, for the government, works for the Federal Aviation Administration. So at some point, he ended up getting a job offer to come out here to Billings, Montana, where I currently live, to work at the tower up on the Rimrock Cliffs here in Billings. So that's how I got here to Billings. My family has since moved on to Washington. He's moved to the Seattle area to continue his career. But I stuck around after graduating high school. This is where I met my wife here at high school. And, we've never really left. But I grew up in a very loving, like very close Christian home. I say loving, very close and Christian. However, I felt like most of my being raised Christian came from the church we ended up going to. Like, honestly, the spiritual conversation didn't really come home very often. Like, we were just really close. We got to know each other really well. My mom was my primary teacher. I was homeschooled up until the beginning of 9th grade when I moved on to public school.
Part of the club.
Absolutely. The homeschool club. But ended up going and joining the heathens in the public school for high school.
It didn't ruin you though. It didn't totally destroy your soul. So that's good. I'm glad, you're not in a ditch doing drugs, I'm
going to withhold my judgment for the time being.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll see. Yeah. Casey, we don't know each other that well yet. We'll see how this goes. Right.
I am suspicious.
Excellent. Yeah. So I grew up doing a bunch of like Awana stuff too. That was a kind of a highlight of my like later elementary to middle school years. Doing a lot of stuff, homeschool co-ops all the way, tiny little like 3 people. We called them choirs. Like, I'm a musician. I like to sing. I like to play guitar and drums and all sorts of stuff. And our little homeschool co-op bands and choirs, it's like 2 or 3 people for a choir.
Yeah.
And that was honestly the main motivation for me to go to public school in 9th grade. My parents literally just left it up to me, and they were like, you've been loving playing drums this long with a homeschool band. Do you want an opportunity to go play with 50 other people at a time instead of like 10
secular
other
people though? That's dangerous. They must have really trusted you.
Well, at that point we were pretty locked into the non-denominational like Bible church that we were going to at the time. So I had a ton of relationships already built throughout youth group. So honestly, the transition to public school wasn't very hard because I knew, probably 20, 30 people that were pretty like me already and that were successfully like being a little countercultural, as the youth group would say.
Being approved workmen who were unashamed.
Unashamed, yes. Very much approved.
Who decides if you're approved or not?
Wow, that is an excellent question.
The Awana committee?
Is there a committee? I honestly don't know what kind of structure there is for that organization. It kind of just seems like one of those, right?
That's actually that's something to dig into. I wonder if there's someone who is like, what that structure is, like, and who writes the curriculum. It's got to be like an actual organization. I wonder if there's any defectors that would want to talk to us.
It kind of feels like like a chapter kind of like a chapter based organization. I almost the parallel feels like something like Boy Scouts of America or
Yeah, sure.
something, right? Where there might be an organization, but then it's just like wherever people want to start this club, we'll let them start it and we'll provide the materials, you know?
Yeah.
What was the older, like it was Awana at my church up to a certain point, and then I don't know if it was like 7th grade, 8th grade, it changed names. Was it like JV or something like that, or I can't remember what
Oh,
it was.
I think I know what you're talking about. I feel like some clubs would transition to a different, like, same like Bible memorization and like quiz based game night or whatever, you know.
Balloon
Um,
volleyball.
yeah, JV sounds really familiar. I'm only familiar with the Awana structure, you know, like starting with the Cubbies, go through Sparkies and get into
I
TNT,
forgot
right?
about those names. Cubbies, Sparkies. It's so funny. I forgot about
Yeah,
those.
dude.
I did some mild. I didn't attend Awana. I did some mild volunteering in it.
Oh, okay. So you were like holding the book while kids recited the verses to you and all that?
I I don't no, not even at that level. I think I would just like be in the gym while the kids would play games and try to help like orchestrate that. It's a very distant
Yeah.
memory
He
for
was
me.
he was in
Yeah.
charge of teaching them that dinosaurs weren't real.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
That their
Yeah.
fossils were put in the ground by God to test their faith.
And
Just to make us wonder.
right. And somehow we're going to do that by hosting game nights with multicolored tape and making them run around in circles until they're tired.
Yeah, there was like that. So that's official then. That multicolor. It's like you have the. It's like yeah, it's like squares.
Yep, red,
and
yellow, green, blue. There
diagonal
were
goes.
teams you would line up on the line, and then the white circle in the middle that kind of like set on top of the 4 quadrants. Yeah, and all sorts of different games we played.
The white circle in the middle represented white evangelical nationalism.
Whoa.
Purity.
Purity.
Do you think that they were doing that on
No.
purpose though, or do you think it was literally we're just gonna
Look,
play
we get
some
that
games?
there's red and blue and green, and we got all these colors around here, but the centrality of this that's holding all of it together is white.
all united.
That was an
Yeah.
accident.
The
Okay.
infrastructure of Awana, many people don't know this, but it's documented. You can look it up. The infrastructure of Awana actually mirrors exactly the infrastructure of the Ku Klux Klan.
No way. Shut up.
Yeah.
Huh.
Vertical
I feel
ladder.
like this is a joke. I feel like it's a joke.
I don't know how to read the sarcasm.
Well, I
in
was
the room
serious.
yet.
I'm very familiar with the
Ku
Ku
Klux
Klux
Klan,
Klan,
yeah.
Oh, right. Absolutely.
Awana or Cubbies, Sparkies, and then Grand Dragons.
Oh, yeah.
Was like the next.
Oh my gosh. Well, you
So it's
forgot
kinda like the
JV in the middle
Freemasons.
somewhere, right? Sparky's TNT, JV, Grand Dragon.
Right.
Just right up on the ladder, right?
Similar. That's
makes
like
sense.
similar structures. Freemasons, right? They get weird structures like that.
Yeah,
That
that's
feels more
that's a
like
weird
some
one.
Freemasons, like the very little I've learned about them feel way more like some like D&D rejects.
Like D&D's
it
for
more
boomers.
seems like Gygax was more plugged into the Masons than anything else, right? Like you start talking about like level 26 Grand Wizards or whatever, and you're like, you
Yeah,
played
right.
D&D as a kid, didn't you? That seems goofy.
I get a friend from college. I mean, he was like an acquaintance. We would see each other at shows and would catch up here and there. I haven't talked to him since I left, but Facebook allows you to continually snoop on people and see what's going on in their lives, even though you have no actual connection. And he became a Mason, like a Freemason. I don't know. Can you shorten it to Mason? I don't know. But he, did his whole like induction ceremony and things like that. And I know like at a low level, there's like, it's pretty, like, apparently it becomes secretive, but I don't really know to what degree. And I don't know if you can get people to talk about it, but like, I find it super interesting because they're like Christian adjacent, but it's not really Christian, but
I feel like, okay, so my dad will, whenever the Masons come up, my dad will tell a story about how like when we were in Georgia, there was a couple that was in their Sunday school group, small group, whatever. And the guy was a Mason and he had gone up a level. And when they were over at their house for Bible study, he like showed some of the guys like this book that they had given him. And he said it was just weird stuff. Like, I don't know what all, but the thing that he always said was like, there was like a prayer to Isis in there, like the goddess of whatever.
Oh,
Huh.
all right.
It's been a long time, and that legend may have grown in his brain over time, but
Sure.
he's been telling
Yeah.
me that since I was like a
The
little
story
kid.
gets crazier every time he pulls it off the shelf, right?
I wonder if you can find those books from like private sellers on Amazon, or if there's like the whole structure as a whole like instantly buys them up before they get into the hands of the public. But I want them.
Oh,
I don't know.
yeah, one of those. It's a black market for
Yeah.
the pamphlets and materials. Oh
Did
my
you-
gosh! Now I'm just imagining like Freemason like tracks, like Bible tracks that you leave like tucked under the chair at the dentist office.
Join
Yeah.
the Freemasons and
In the- in the-
privilege to secrets
The, like nightstand at the Hampton Inn.
Oh yes, absolutely.
with your Gideon
Tuck
next to the Gideon Bible.
No, it's a bookmark for the Gideon Bible. You open the John 3:16 and bookmark it. That sounds about right.
Dude, you just did an episode on cults, didn't you? On Ravel?
We've done a few. That is one area that my co-hosts love quite a bit. Emily, like throughout high school and college, was very fascinated with like serial killers and just like the psychology that goes into those kind of people, and that pretty well translates into the kind of people who become cult leaders and the kind of people who become cult followers and all that. And Josh is particularly interested in that as well. I for one, like, I don't know, that bug just never really got me. Like, I know that these groups exist, and I like listening to the one-off podcast about like Heaven's Gate or something like that. But I don't know, like, it's not the rabbit hole that I usually dive down, but oh my gosh, it's fascinating, especially to just like pick the brain of people who have studied it and just like looked into it. It's wild.
There's some weird ones out there.
Yeah, that's Casey's thing. He's always that bug got him, so I'm sure he could have some fun conversations about that. I just got in contact with somebody just the other day who so I'm from Massachusetts, and who was part of like a culty. It seems like it was an actual cult. I have to finish kind of listening to the story. She's got a podcast about it, and it was in Connecticut though. So that's instantly I become more interested in things when they're like within an hour and a half driving distance from me, right? I feel like
I can imagine. Yeah, absolutely.
It becomes so much closer to home. Like if you found out something happened in your state versus like a cult that happened like over in California or something like that, it does make a difference in your level of interest, because you could. It makes it feel like maybe you could have known someone who was in it, or it's like, oh shit, this stuff's really close to home. Whatever.
Yeah. Well, what's the rule they put out where it's like you're only 6 degrees away from knowing anyone on the planet? Like if you want to look for a connection to something, you're usually like at most 6 relationships away from finding someone that can put you in touch.
That is kind of cool to think about.
I believe that.
And even that, man, especially just given the physical proximity, you have to imagine like you probably know someone who knows someone that was in it, right?
Oh, I'm sure.
Well, it's like here in Wichita, there's a couple of weird things, some of that subject matter.
Sure.
Podcast that I really like, Time Suck. The guy recently did an episode about a cult based here in Wichita. It was like a small, more of like a Manson family type of group. And literally like the main compound thing is like 20 miles from here, straight down the road from me. But it was called Angel's Landing. And the guy just seemed like an idiot. I mean, he just seemed like a charlatan through and through. And he just talked these people into following him around and giving him their money. And then when they'd start to run low, he would talk them into basically offing themselves to get their insurance money.
Oh,
so it wasn't quite as crazy as like a Heaven's Gate, but it's like, it's right there.
Whoa. Yeah. Especially you dig into any one of those guys, it becomes about money, power. And eventually when the money and power get boring, it becomes about sex almost invariably.
Yeah.
Right. Pedophilia, like every time.
And it doesn't even have to start there though. Like it might just be like you are the one guy on the commune that gets to have sex with everyone. Right.
Yeah.
Well, there's a thing,
and then
there.
It's just a descent, right?
Those dudes are obsessed with control and power over other people. And so like once they establish like financial dominance and they're completely dominating these people's time and daily routine and what they eat and how often they sleep and their activities, like they're not ever satisfied with that. So they're always looking to take it to like another more degrading level to where they more completely own
Hmm.
their followers. So it usually starts out like, every one of them starts out with the cult leader all of a sudden proclaiming that like he gets to choose who gets married, and he starts reassigning wives and husbands. He decides when they can have sex and when they can't. Pretty soon he's the only one having sex with everyone's wife. And it's like, if he has enough time, eventually he ends up banging kids. It's like it's like happens over and over and over again in those cult stories.
Right.
And I think that's what that really showcases, like what it's about for those dudes. They just, every norm they want to overturn and do it like right in people's faces.
Right.
Should we pivot to the parallels that you see in megachurches now, or should we leave that for later?
Oh, well, that's a good question. Well, so I suppose I should finish a little bit of my biography now that we've
Yes.
let's
chased down Juanas at this point, right? So definitely growing up in youth group, like I like to say the church I grew up in was non-denominational, but like in the closet Baptists. Like the
Yeah.
theology so closely aligns to anything Baptist. They just didn't want to have like a church hierarchy above them. It was like, we're a local church. We're just going to do this thing, which was honestly fine. Like I grew up and I like truly cherish many, many memories of growing up in that church, even the youth group. Like, I have friendships today, like 10 years after graduating high school, that I wouldn't have had I not gone to that youth group and like formed a relationship then. Like a couple of those guys became my roommates during college, and like we were each other's best man at our wedding. Like, and we still see each other like every week on the disc golf course, or like grabbing a beer or something like that. So it's definitely not all bad. I think my most fun youth group story is when we started getting into the True Love Waits curriculum,
Nice.
doing the purity rings and all that. So again, as a budding musician in my life, now finally going to high school where I can like meet a lot more people and like play music with a lot more people, I was starting to get in on the youth group band as well. And somebody quote unquote discovered that I can sing. Like I've been able to sing my entire life, but I'd always been on the drums because that was like my first love in music. And then somebody's like, "Oh, you can sing. Can you play guitar? Like it would be so cool to have you worship lead, right?" Because if we're being honest, I could sing better than a lot of the guys that were trying to lead the worship at the youth group.
Yeah.
So they're like, pick up 3 chords on the guitar, right? And just get after it, man. And I remember gearing up for the purity ceremony, which I don't know if you guys are familiar with that part of the curriculum, but it's like,
I'm not familiar with the curriculum at all. I didn't do that. So let's get into what leads up to a ceremony.
Okay. Yeah, ceremony is the perfect word for it, by the way. Picture like the church sanctuary, but dark at night with only candles illuminating the
my
room.
God.
No way.
Yeah, but so it was like a 6-week curriculum. Yeah.
Did you get college credit for it? No.
Oh my God. Well, would that count for psych credit, you think?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Diving deep into that.
Yeah, so it was like a 6-week curriculum, and it's like it's the highlights of what we all know to be purity culture at this point, right? Like,
yeah, no surprises.
Save yourself for marriage. The marriage is designed to be between a man and a woman, and the act of sex is the covenant, like bringing together of 2 people. And we had a couple like testimonials from our youth pastor and his wife and like a couple other leaders that like just turned into like teary nights of like, I didn't save myself, but then I got married and God turned me around. And it was like, and I remember just being so thoroughly convinced. I'm like, oh yes, absolutely. It seems like not even entertaining a sexual thought, like forget like having sex. I'm going to struggle the most with even just like looking at the wrong things on the internet and touching myself during that. Right.
Yeah.
Like very much internalized into just a ton of shame of like, wait, I can't notice that someone is attractive without like being afraid of that being the definition of lust.
Yeah, dude, it's so funny how basic that got. It did turn that person's hot into I'm lusting. Oh shit. Like
Right. Right.
real quick.
Yeah.
Which has
And
come
there's
up a
still a
couple
lot of people
times.
doing that.
Oh, absolutely. I think more people kind of see it for what it is, though. Again, it does have a little hint of that control thing. I mean, like, what's the latest Matthew West, like, hottest is
Yeah.
or modest is hottest
Yeah. That
video
little
on Twitter?
slogan's been around for a long time too.
Oh yeah, and he tried to make a satire video out of it, and then Twitter just like completely
He
dunked on
got,
him.
yeah. People like rubbed his face in his shit for that real bad.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you guys ever get the like one of the weirdest tangents I remember from that whole thing is like situations where the subject of masturbation would come up and someone would be like, look, do I think that the act of masturbation is wrong? Not necessarily. It's the lust that's wrong. If you can masturbate without lusting, then more power to you. But for me, I just don't trust myself to do that. Like,
It's a
what a
slippery slope.
weird direction to go.
Yeah.
You know?
I remember saying that to people in college. I actually never got, no one once in my life talked to me about masturbation. Nobody.
Maybe you're the one that talked to me about
I
it.
probably
Maybe
said
you're
that to
guilt
you
tripping
in
me.
college. I remember having that conversation with our RA about but because those were the conversations you had as a freshman at a Christian college, was whether or not it was okay to jerk off. So,
dude, our RA was like 6'8" and 350 pounds. I guarantee you he had a two-hander.
yeah.
Oh my god, yes.
Those big cans of Monster?
Yeah.
They only sell at 7-Eleven.
It's like
You're describing a tall boy. Yeah, a tall boy.
Oh my god. Okay.
Which my
Makes my
reference
cervix
point for a
hurt.
tall boy at that point. I'm not even talking about beer. I'm talking about those cans of like Arizona sweet tea you get at the
it's like-
gas station, right? Like
Perfect.
because I was a good Christian kid. I didn't drink until I was 21.
Yeah.
So I'm just talking about tea. Anyway.
All right, back to the purity ceremony.
Yeah, so it was like 6 weeks of that, and I think the thing that I've certainly deconstructed the most following that experience is the difference between like, men or boys like think about self-control and like don't look at women as something to be used. Which there's like a good message somewhere in there, but then when it turns around and it's like women, basically you should probably just wear trash bags. Just to make sure you don't show off your physical form, like don't cause a brother to stumble or anything like that.
Right.
I just recently saw a tweet. Someone said, modesty is not one of the fruits of the spirit, but self-control is. And I was like, hey, look at that.
Would you look at that?
Well done.
You get out of here with that.
Well done. But yeah, so we finished this process. I am becoming a youth group worship leader, and I decided it would be the best idea to write a song about it.
And you're going to perform that song for us right now. No,
please do.
That song, even like the lyrics to it are so deep in repressed memories at this point. I wish I could, but yeah, it was a song all about like, it was basically like trying to get out some sexual energy that we were discussing. Cause obviously for 6 weeks as a youth group, like in a co-ed setting, right? Like I'm listening to my youth pastor and his wife talk about like how awesome sex is now that they're married. And I'm sitting I'm sitting like 10 feet away from the girl I've had a crush on for like 4 years now. And I'm just like, what? like it was literally that feeling like you have way too much coffee and you're just sitting in your chair and you're just like you so antsy, you're just like vibrating. You're like, there's a lot of sexual energy even in the room with the youth pastor and his wife talking about it. But like, and it was one of those things where like I wrote the song as like a special music moment for the purity ceremony, and it was literally like if you looked at the lyrics, it would very much reveal that I was trying to translate that literal sexual energy into like trying to interpret it as like passion for God or passion for like
hence worship
like,
music, right?
Boy, you could go deep on that theme.
Hello. Yeah. So we get all dressed up. Like they literally wanted us to dress up. So we all like all the girls wore dresses, all the guys wore like button up shirts and a tie or whatever. ties that are like borrowed from their dad and they're like hanging past their knees. You know,
Yes.
I'm just painting the picture. But yeah, the
real
purity
thick
ceremony.
ties.
Yeah,
Thick
we
ones.
invited all our parents to the purity ceremony after the youth group finished the curriculum, and it was like on a Sunday night. We did a couple worship songs. I performed my sexy Jesus song. And then one by one, like the youth pastor, like we had all been sized already for our purity rings. And like one by one, the youth pastor would like bring each kid up and like give them the ring on like a pillow. Right. And it was literally like, with this ring, do you promise yourself to God and to your future spouse?
Ugh.
You know what would be more fun is if instead of a ring, they gave you one of those like chastity penis cages.
Yes! Can you imagine a youth pastor putting that order in on like adamandeve.com?
Yeah.
It's like some kid in Los Angeles, like, we don't usually get bulk orders for these.
Right.
And it's his job to put them on everyone. Of course, your back is to the audience, but he gets the full frontal.
As it turns out, the guy behind the entire purity movement is a commissioned salesperson for penis cages. Just raking it in.
I mean, maybe. Yeah. Go to extremerestraints.com to get your purity penis cage.
He's driving like a Lamborghini with a custom plate that says like
bondage
got him
for
locked
Jesus.
up. Oh, I wish this was a real person.
Yeah.
I would love to meet him.
Yeah, this fictional man we're creating is very yikes. I mean, we're headed toward a cult right there, aren't we?
Right.
But yeah, so it was like the room was dark. The youth pastor was going through this thing, handing us all our rings. And like our parents were there and everyone was crying. And it was like this big emotional moment of like, look at the youth of today, like standing up to what our culture is telling them sex is. Like, sex isn't cheap. It's like the most sacred thing, which part of that I still believe. But I started going to public school. I became this worship leader. And then I met my current wife. Wow, that sounded like I've met the girl that is now my wife. Met when I was a freshman, started dating when I was a freshman. And she was LDS or Mormon at the time.
Oh, no way.
And I was the very the very brave man who had a crush on her that was going to like date her so that she would become a Christian, like missionary dating,
Yes.
as it's called, right?
Unequal yoking right here. I don't feel good about it.
I got a lot of advice about that. You better believe me, especially from my youth pastor. I remember overhearing my youth pastor and a couple other the youth leaders. They used to literally take bets on the couples that were in the youth group, and they would like put money on how long it would take for them to break up or get pregnant. And it was like, okay, that's not cool.
No.
Yeah, I don't know. That's,
I did learn eventually that there was a lot of money riding on me breaking up with Dixie, and 11 years later, 6 years into marriage, fuck you guys.
Yeah.
right? Pay up, you pricks.
Yeah.
We're doing all right. I feel like
man.
I'm owed that money now.
Yeah, you certainly are. Yeah, We'll just all mass message him. Let's send the crowds after him.
Right. So that eventually happened. She professed herself to be an evangelical Christian like I was instead of a Mormon, which to me it felt like I was literally like snatching someone from the blue flames of hell, right?
Yeah.
Like she was in the outer circle and heading deeper, and I was like, no. But you can imagine when you have a ton of like super spiritual conversations like that when you're 15 and also just like humming with sexual energy, like you better believe as boyfriend and girlfriend we were starting to do some stuff. And I shit you guys not, literally the day after like we were making out and we started doing stuff we weren't supposed to, the day after I woke up and my purity ring had cracked.
Oh my god, that's like Lord of the Rings level.
And my fucking neuroses, I was like, now I'm the one going to hell, damn it.
Oh my god, that's incredible. What were these things made out of?
Like pewter, and it was like painted silver,
Oh my
basically.
god.
Yeah.
What are the chances, man? That is,
Wow.
if that doesn't convince you that you fucked up, then I don't know what would. I'm surprised you didn't just like stay in that lane for the rest of your life after something like that.
Did
I
you
took it
cry?
as I oh yes, 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 yes. And then we actually broke up for like a year and a half after that, and
Oh, so they
started.
did make some money off you guys. You
They may have, to be
bastards.
honest. Um, that's actually a really good point. Thanks for bringing that up.
Just trying to keep you humble, you know.
So I did lose. I
As a
did lose.
as a
Damn it.
brother in Christ, I want you to,
Right. Right.
stay
Right. Right.
humble.
Right. Yes. Yes. Absolutely. So we started dating again, like right around the time I was graduating high school, and dated for a couple of years during college. We both went to college here in Billings at Rocky Mountain, and like 2 years in, still dating. Basically, we were both just like, we're tired of not being married now. We've been dating basically off and on for 5 years, um, and we both like wanted to just take a year off of school. And then we got married that summer, and we were just going to be like, we're just going to take a year, learn what it's like to be married, um, and and then we never went back to school, and we continued to be married, and we're just here in Billings. That feels like the anticlimax to the real story there, though. Man, yeah, the I still have like that feeling in my chest sometimes where I don't know if you guys struggle with this anymore, but like growing up in a world and a culture like Awana and youth group and like that very evangelical setting, I have these moments, especially like post deconstruction or however we say it. Like I guess we use the word ravel on my other podcast instead of deconstruction, but even post like raveling out my faith and coming to different conclusions, I have moments, and I don't know if they're just like bad moments of anxiety, but sometimes I get that feeling of like, what if they were all right when I was a teenager, right? And what if I am like literally just the conclusion to the prophecy of some people will walk away from their faith and walk away
Yeah,
from the right.
it's funny. I remember going through that a lot. I haven't. It's been a long time since I felt that way. If I'm not completely sure of much, but I remember when I first started changing my mind about things. I was like, God, there's a good like 3-4 nights that I remember just being up for probably most of it, just laying in bed, being like, what if I'm wrong? What if I'm wrong? And at that
Yeah,
point, I hadn't
right.
made any conclusions. And what's crazy, but this is some of the things that kind of like not at the time, at night. Anxiety is always like really shitty at night. Like if you wake up and have a bad, even just a bad dream, you're just like, everything's falling apart. My life's a
Yeah,
disaster. You're
right.
like looking into how you can completely uproot and change your life at 2 a.m. And you're like, and then you
Yep,
wake up the next
yep.
day and you're just kind of fine again. So that, of course, is part of that. But I remember thinking like, I hadn't even made up my mind about anything. And it's like, I learned enough from those people about what I thought Christianity was about to be like, and there was enough stories in the Bible about people who didn't quote unquote get it, where I was like, okay, if like the big problem here is me thinking or about whether or not this idea or that idea is true, and I'm this worked up about whether or not I go to hell because of
Yeah,
that,
right,
like then
right.
there, like it kind of helped me through it, being like, that doesn't even make sense. Like that is not what any of this was all about, or what I thought any of it was about, based on even what I was taught. So it's like, to get to a point where if they can if you can be that anxious and scared over something that's supposed to be about something more than just like, to some degree it was believing the right things, like Jesus Christ is their personal Lord and Savior, but they had a lot of footnotes and they had a lot of like wiggle room, and I just was like, these guys, that felt really disingenuous to me from people who made you feel that way, because it was
Sure.
like, what, I don't see that anywhere from Jesus. Jesus was just like, hey, you don't get it, but thanks for showing up. Hey, you don't get it, but thanks for showing up. Like it wasn't, the stakes didn't seem that high when I like looked at it from that perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. What I'm curious, Casey, to hear from you. I know Sam and I both still identify as Christians. I don't think you do at this point, at least from what I've listened to of the show already. So, um, like, do you ever struggle with any of those like I could still be wrong based on the way you were raised.
No, I don't
No.
actually. You know,
That's
I think,
Damn, that
well,
makes me so jealous almost.
well, that was like, uh, I feel like my movement away from it was just a lot different than like Sam's, and you know, a big part of what like bothered me the most was just like even back to like dating and stuff. You know, I
Mm,
my wife and I, my current wife and I dated.
yes, thank you. So many
We did.
wives left in your wake, and you have the current one.
We dated for like 2.5 years, and you know, like early on we started like having heartfelt discussions about lines and things like that. And I just remember like the thing that I was most that worried me the most was that, like, I mean, early on in our relationship we would do those things and you felt guilty, like you had broken a rule, not like you
Mm-hmm.
had disobeyed God, or that you had like this deep conviction about it. And I almost like felt guilty that I didn't feel worse about doing those things. And I think
Whoa,
that kind of
yeah,
moved, that kept going like as I got older and stuff. And that's where, you know, it took me a long time to finally like just go, I don't, what am I don't even care about this stuff anymore. Like why do I still feel like I have to pay lip service to this? Like, obviously I don't go to church. I don't read the Bible. I don't think about it on a regular basis. Like, the only time this comes through is when I feel like I have to state my identity for some reason, you know,
mm,
to someone that I'm talking to, or in regards to like some political thing or something like that.
yeah,
And so yeah, by the time I was like, it was really just more like an admission at some point where I was like, I I'm not, I don't have any connection to this anymore. Like, why am I still pretending that like this is important to me? It's obviously not.
wow, wow. I feel
Yeah.
like I'm starting to get the beginning hints of almost that like guilty for not being overly guilty feeling. Like my wife and I, since the pandemic started, like we haven't gone back to church, and I for one don't feel like I want to or even need to. Like I just have no desire. I'm like, wow, like an entire year just proved to me that I can have a spiritual life and have spiritual conversations with friends and like have a real deep connection with the people in my life that more emulate what I think church ought to be anyway, right?
Dude,
Instead of like
I feel
doing
that.
the Christian TED Talk with the Hillsong concert, right? Or like the
It,
cover band of the Hillsong, because that's basically all worship bands are, right? Is just Hillsong cover
At
bands.
this point, it
it's
seems
If we're
such
such
being
bad
ridiculous.
music.
honest,
I I know people love worship music. Like, some people really honestly love it.
yeah,
But I
yeah,
never have. I've always felt like it just came across as so like boring and phoned in to me, and all the lyrics
right.
are like, you put keywords on like refrigerator magnets and just like shuffle them around, and boom, we got a new
Yeah.
configuration.
Yeah,
New worship song, add
it's
four
all
chords.
it's all just variations on a theme of like a few verses, or yeah,
It's
a few
so much of
central
it's
ideas about like
directed at your unworthiness. Oh, I'm so awful, but thanks to you, God, I don't have to feel so shitty about myself. It's like
mm,
the amount of collective singing around people just being like, I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy. It's like, oh my God. That got
wow,
old to me pretty. That was one of the first things that hit me when I was like, I hate this. This is all like, woe is me. I'm super sad. Like, but
yeah,
I'm worthless piece of shit. But God's good. So this is awesome. And it's like, we're all singing this together. Like, that doesn't sound healthy or feel right.
right.
Or
You
them
know,
like
Sam.
thirsty anthems.
Hey, there you go. Yeah,
Yeah.
the thirst trap Jesus music.
Oh, I can take us on a fun little detour that I didn't know if I was going to get us
Oh,
into.
Sam, I've never made the connection as deeply as I just did now. Something you said basically sparked the idea of like we get sad or angry at stories of people who would like, like the Catholic priest who would literally like whip themselves, like self-flagellation,
Yeah.
like scarring themselves in punishment for their sins while they're trying to pray the rosary or something like that. Like there's something deep in us that's like that's messed up. Like you should not be doing that. And like I feel like the line is usually like, Jesus took those scars so you don't have to, my friend, like, but why couldn't it also be the same that like Jesus took those insults so that you don't have to like be the self-flagellating guy who's just like identifying with being a piece of shit,
Yeah, and
right?
because nobody actually, I'm not. Maybe some people might feel that way, and if they do because of that message, then that's, I think,
Yeah,
too bad. And
right.
I know the response to that from the Christian side is just like, no, the beauty of it is you are, but you don't have to feel that way because Jesus. And it's just like, I don't think that's the right message at all. I think that's why we're in this fucking shithole
Right.
situation
Because
with
on face
evangelicalism.
value, right. Because on face value, the message is literally you are not that anymore because you have like a new identity in Christ, right? If
Mm-hmm.
you follow Jesus, it's a literal transformation.
Yeah, which leaves everybody else who hasn't had that transformation to be pitied.
Right.
It's sad.
That's wild. That's
I
wild.
always thought of like the self-flagellation thing is almost like this is just like some masked, some thinly veiled like kinky Albert Fish type stuff.
We're back to bondage for
Yeah.
Christ.
Exactly.
Yep.
Good, perfect callback.
I mean, that
I've
could
been
be it.
naughty, Lord.
Oh my God.
Punish me, Daddy.
That could be it. I was curious to explore this in preparing to come on the show. I was curious to explore the idea of like indoctrination certainly exists, right? Like growing up in a youth group that does like the purity ceremony or growing up in Awana or something like that. Like indoctrination just does exist. I don't know how you guys feel. I'm kind of convinced that it's inevitable that like everyone is literally indoctrinated. And I don't know if it's a bad thing. There's just bad things to be like indoctrinated with.
I think so. I
Yeah.
mean, that's just part of growing up, I think, is like you're young, you don't have any life experience yet. Like sometimes the best anybody can do for you is just to feed you like their ideas and life experiences on a platter and
Yeah.
understand that someday you're going to test those for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
One of the things I think because I have to consider this a good bit at this point, having two young kids, it's like, and what I want to teach them, I guess, is, we were all handed the message of, hey, this is what the truth is. The stakes are really high. I know you're only 6, but fire's really hot and you don't want to live in it. So you should really figure this out pretty quick.
Right.
And so you build like, but that's not required for young children. Fact is, young children are going to believe what their parents believe. They don't have to give them this big like ultimatum, last meal kind of conversation about it. Like, my kids are most likely going to believe the things that I believe up until the point where they decide that they don't. And maybe they still will. So for me, I think one of the differences between indoctrination and just like healthy structures and even, concrete beliefs versus abstract, because kids just believe things in concretes. They don't abstract doesn't work for them. So for me to talk to my kid about like a concept of God that exists but doesn't, and is but isn't, and doesn't and isn't anthropomorphic, and doesn't probably really talk to us in a way that anyone might think, like that's just worthless. Like they're not gonna, in the same way that like I'm not like, because we're fine with that. We're fine with that when it comes to like Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny, and we know that they'll shed those beliefs and they'll be okay. Now, obviously, the difference being God from an evangelical perspective is it's okay to shed beliefs about Santa and the Easter Bunny, and to equate God with that is a huge sin. But my point is just that my children can't think in abstract at this point, and I don't do a great job. I don't really talk to them about God that much. But I'm not worried about the same things that I think our parents were. Like you can tell them this is what I believe, and they'll just roll with that for a long time, as opposed to this is what I believe and you should too, or else. And that's the difference. It's like one promotes healthy growth and the other one promotes like anxiety and shame and fear and kind of distrust once you realize those systems are breaking down.
Yeah. So do you think it's harmful to like tell a kid that Santa Claus exists, or is it?
No. I mean, I do Santa with
I
my
don't think
kids.
so.
It'll just be like, because then
It's
one day they're
fun.
just like, Santa Claus doesn't exist. But the fear, I know, like
Well,
the fear for parents is they could do the same thing about God. Like, oh, you've
Oh
been
yeah,
telling
no,
me
yeah,
the Sky
exactly.
Daddy exists, and now, so
At that point, I feel like that should be like its own logical fallacy, though, to argue like Jesus into the
yes,
Santa Claus
yes,
robe. But I I feel like the difference is like a parent trying to raise a child according to their own life experience, because really that's the only frame that you can raise a kid in, is like, this is where we live, these are the people we know, this is the world we inhabit and like we interact with. It's one thing to tell a child that the stove is hot and they should not touch it. It's another thing to say like to have sex before marriage is hot and then they're going to go to hell and they should not do it, right? Because like
it's hot
it's
though.
kind
It's
of
hot.
kind of hot.
one can be tested. It's hot in many meanings of the word, if we're being honest.
I should have put my cage on.
But so one can be tested. A child can touch a stove and learn like, my parent was absolutely right about this. Maybe I should trust them with more things, right? I think where things started breaking down for me, and again, it was less my parents than it was the church, because I feel like something that happened in my own life, and honestly something that I'm working with my parents on right now, is like, I feel like most of my spiritual parenting was almost like handed off to the church or done by proxy. Basically, my
Mhm.
parents were like, the church will take care of that side and we'll just do our thing over here, right? We did the homeschooling thing and all that, which still had its elements. Like I was raised on a Becca curriculum that's like 6,000-year-old Earth,
Right.
fake dinosaurs are fake news or whatever the hell they want to say. I was raised on that, but even by like 7th grade, I'm like, something seems weird, doesn't it? This doesn't quite line up with what I'm seeing in the world. And that's
Mhm.
kind of the thing where it's like, you can test the stove is hot with direct experience, but a lot of the things around a spiritual conversation and in the church is like, you can't even really test the people that raised you. You can't really test their experience because it's so internal to them. And maybe even that was just handed on by their parents and the generation before that. But you can't directly test that the fires of hell are super hot. You can test a
Yeah.
stove.
I think like yeah, there's a lot there. I mean, for one, just on the Santa Claus, I think part of the reason that like Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny and stuff like that is fine is because sooner rather than later, that belief is not going to be consequential to a kid. By the time they hit
Mm-hmm.
6, 7, 8, they're pretty okay with letting Santa Claus go. Maybe not every kid, but most kids.
Right.
On this whole segment, I think where it becomes a real problem, and maybe this isn't where it begins, but one of the problems that I had is that it was very much taught as a part of a worldview of like, it's us versus them, and you have to protect
Mm,
yourself from them.
yeah.
And that's, we do that in a lot of different ways. I mean, we don't hang out places where those type of people hang out. We go to this tiny Christian school with 40 kids so that we can protect ourselves from the world. We
Mhm.
go to church with the exact same people. We need you to go to a Christian college when you're done. Like, there's all of those things, and those weren't all like instigated on me. Like, I
Oh
learned
yeah.
that mentality, and then I did those things. Like I protected myself from outside viewpoints and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
And but I think that ultimately, like, everyone is going to have to test those ideas, and some people, and we all know people who, for one reason or another, just kind of like reach that high water mark and just said, nope, I'm going straight back in. Like, and they just buckled down on those beliefs and went back to church and protected themselves from any outside influence. But
Yeah.
for me, like, I think that's why it made it really hard for me. Like, I had a really tough adjustment period
Oh yeah,
when I
certainly.
finally had to leave the nest, and you know
Well, yeah, it would be like, for some reason you're reminding me of the Shyamalan movie The Village, right? With the
Yeah.
yellow
yes,
robes and the red robes and all that.
the
Like
bad killer.
it would be as if you like hopped the fence and discovered that like a park ranger in a pickup truck is on the other side of that fence, and like now your entire world is transformed. And like that movie has a lot of things to say, and it's, you know, it's convenient that you send the blind girl over because she can't actually see it, right? um but yeah, it would be as
Yeah.
if you hopped the fence, and some people just want to be like, I just want to go back to the village where we're like lighting oil lamps and reading books that were published 80 years ago, where all the elders still know like there's a whole world of crime and evil going on outside, and we just wanted to insulate ourselves, you know.
Yeah, and there's so many facets to all of this, but going back to like your purity ceremony thing, like why have that purity ceremony? It's
Mm,
for a reason. And it really has a lot to do with indoctrination. It's we make this,
Mhm.
we don't just teach this idea, but we make this in this huge formal thing out of it to
yeah.
make it that much more consequential for you,
Well,
you
yeah,
know?
it's to create memories and to create like an emotional moment that sticks with you so that you can like, I mean, honestly, if we're like a wedding ceremony is probably the exact same thing. Like it's the thing
Yeah.
that's appealed to when your marriage gets in like a really tough situation. Like you appeal to like, remember the vows we said, you know. And in that way, like I think the church leadership that ran me through a purity ceremony is essentially just saying like, you know, he's obviously going to get horny, he's obviously going to be tempted, and if we can create a moment that is special to him and that he can remember back like he was part of a group that all believed the same thing and they were excited to make that agreement together, and like there's a physical representation of it, like again, that's what we do in marriage, and that's one of those things like it's a big deal in like in shows when the husband goes out to a bar and takes his ring off, right? It's like, ooh, what is he going for, right? Because like
Right.
somehow that invalidates his marriage, or like it's a way for him to hide it. So like, yeah, it's indoctrinating to do the ceremony like that, but I still even think that there's a way that that can be interpreted as they were simply in good faith trying to do what they thought would be best for me in the long run, you know?
Sure. It's not necessarily nefarious,
Right.
but it is what it is. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a methodology. There's a methodology to it, you know.
I think one
Oh,
of the things that's
absolutely.
becoming very apparent over time for people who have left the evangelical culture is that there could have been a few bad actors, but by and large, the people I knew were honestly doing what they thought was best. And that
Yeah. Yep.
just doesn't matter anymore. Like, and that's where I'm kind of falling is like, you can honestly think that what you were doing was best for somebody and still traumatize them. You can honestly do what you
Mm-hmm.
think is best for somebody and still, I mean, how many of those like crazy overprotective parent stories have we heard where it's just like their kids are practically locked in closets because they're so afraid of the outside world. Like there is a level of which protection in being genuine and
Mm-hmm.
in your response to your beliefs is just dangerous or problematic. And I just am like, so do I think that they were bad actors? Do I think that no, I think that they're misguided in their understanding about sex and its impacts on people. Um, as much as I think that they're misguided about, what happens when your theology changes and what happens when you just don't believe in anything anymore. Like,
Mm-hmm.
but but that also is what makes them like there still is, I think, an element of that is kind of going back to the culty shit we were talking about earlier, that element of control in it. Like, at some level it's bothering these people in their 50s a little too much that people they barely know whose children are having sex are doing that. Like, it's like you shouldn't be that invested, and the
Mm-hmm.
fact that you are shows like how much you think that you need to be in control. And of course, their explanation is that it's God and it's God's will, and they want to help people live out God's will because that's what's best for them. But
Mm-hmm.
sorry, I just like it's hard to fucking care like that about that justification or explanation, even if you're a good person in the way that you present yourself, or if I could have a meaningful conversation with you, or you wouldn't write me off because I don't think the same like you. But there's still that element of distrust I have for those type of people, because I don't even know that a sincere conversation is possible, because I would think in the back of their mind, their only hope is that I would change mind.
There's an angle. Yeah.
It's just I can't trust those kinds of people anymore. And if they're that concerned where they want to construct these ceremonies around, it's like I know. So I hear what you're saying about the intent. And
Mm-hmm.
because they believe that that's right and they want to set up this thing that you'll remember in that way that'll help you stand on your convictions. And I get, so it's like they think that that's all good. And if they are right, then that is good. But if you're
Right.
wrong, it's disastrous. And what we've seen through human psychology and just general progressive values and I mean, really just life experience. What I mean, the evidence is stacking up that they are just emphatically wrong. And
Mm-hmm.
if you want to double down super hard on something you're emphatically wrong about, you're just you're just hurting people at that point.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about like those types of people. The other day, my sister and her husband were in town, and we got to talking about some of this stuff. And family friend who was a person in leadership at their youth group, uh, when they were still, my sister and her husband started dating when they were like 14
Okay.
and dated all through high school and college and stuff, and then got married, right?
Yeah.
When they were still in high school, this person, without my parents' knowledge or consent or even talking about it with anything, approached my sister and her boyfriend and said, you guys just need to get married. Like, you need to get married and go do it right away, because you're just playing with fire. You're risking. You've been dating for too long. It's time for you to get married. You just need to go do it. And you talk about people's intentions and stuff, and like, yeah, we all know what the intention was there. It was, we got to make sure that these two kids don't do something dumb and have to pay for the consequences of it for the rest of their lives. Whatever the thought
So
process
get married
was.
at 16 years old and they can wipe that problem off the table.
Yeah, and that's where like the priorities are so ridiculous, and like you said, it's hard to trust some of those people, because they to them, to marry someone, to be a child and to marry another child, basically, or to be out of that high school level, anyways, to be an adult and marry someone that you barely know. That's a better option to them than the risk of potentially like losing your purity.
Yeah.
And it's so ridiculous. It's just it's such a ridiculous viewpoint that
Yeah.
once you're out, like, you just, once you've spent some time away from that like emphatic purity message, you just listen to that and you're like, that is so dumb. Like, I know those people. I know people who did what you're saying and then like ruined years of their lives, or had a messy divorce, or
Mm.
married an abusive person.
Yeah,
Like, they
that
didn't
one's
even
big.
know, because they didn't know that person when they married him. They were just so ready to marry at a premature time. And the judgment, I mean, their judgment is just not, it's not good. And intention's fine, but your judgment is bad.
Mm. Yeah. That was definitely the message I had internalized. Like, I got married when I was 20.
Yeah, yeah. We're like, there's a lot of parallels between our lives, man.
I know, we discovered that during K&P, and it was pretty it was pretty wild.
Yeah.
But yeah, I got married when I was 20, and that was part of the message that I had internalized. And it was like, I'm still dating this person even after having however many like sexual moral failings, um, like with each other in high school. Like, there may have been for a time a little bit of like a sense of guilt where it's like, well, we did take each other's virginity, so I should marry her. Like, almost like a
Oh,
honor
gross.
code. That was something
Mm.
I had internalized too. By the time I was getting married, that was certainly not my motivation. Like, I genuinely like love the hell out of this woman. She is my best friend and has been my best friend for 11 years now. Like, our anniversary is in 2 weeks, our 6-year anniversary of marriage. Like, she is my best friend, and it's been absolutely fantastic to get to know each other. But like, the real getting to know each other came after we got married and got a ton of that sexual energy out of the way. And now it's like, okay, now we can start having the conversations that probably would have mattered more, you know?
Just throwing in a note, current best friend.
Yeah.
Current best friend. Right.
Current.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
With the callback, Casey. I'm so proud of you. Yes. Thank you so much. It is, I am thinking like the phrase like alternative culture is kind of going on in my head now. Like, with the way our conversation is going, it's fascinating to me that like there is a way, probably just a poor rationalization, but there's a way that evangelicalism has become like kind of it's like a countercultural movement that truly believes that they don't have a culture of their own, and that they are truly just like pure objective neutral, and like
Yeah. Yeah.
right, like they can define themselves as the counterculture against, like, I don't know, liberal values or the globalists or whatever, and they're just like, yeah, but the world is this way, we don't have a culture, we just are not that culture, you know.
Yeah.
Like
Luciferians.
very
Yeah.
much. Well, I mean, like, I feel like it is kind of revealed in the way like you would see at the Christian bookstore, right? It's like, if you like Primus or Nirvana, you'll love Cutlass or whatever, right? And
Yeah.
then like they put the Skillet record next to the thing that you were probably honestly wanting to listen to more anyway. Because that's how I grew up too, is like I would go in and like be looking for new music, and I would go to those charts because like I would hear friends in high school talk about like, yeah, I'm into these bands. I'm like, oh, I shouldn't listen to secular music. Um, so I'm going to go find the Christian like alternative culture version of it. Right.
Yeah.
Oh, thank goodness I've lost that too, because I've honestly discovered way better music in,
Yeah.
in the meantime.
I'm fully ready to nerd out on Christian bands if you want to go there.
Cutlass, dude, was my jam growing up. Oh, like I idolized those guys. I literally I broke the second commandment idolizing the guys in Cutlass.
Oh
Because
man.
they were doing they were the hard rock thing that I was really into, but they also had like the Strong Tower worship record out, right? And I'm like, whoa, so you can do hard music and worship God,
Oh man, I forgot about that one.
right?
You are my strong tower.
I remember
Yeah.
whenever I would find out that people in like the bands that I liked were also like worship leaders at their church, it would be like, oh, so they are really legit. That's good to know.
They're cool. They're
I can
cool.
trust this.
Yeah. My first my first concert ever, I went to an Acquire the Fire conference. I don't know if you guys remember these things.
Oh yeah,
I'm
that's been a
Acquire the
frequent
Fire.
topic.
Fantastic. So my first concert ever was Skillet headlining an Acquire the Fire stop here in
Yeah.
Billings, arena tour, and they had just come out with Comatose, which I was
That's a good tour.
It was a good one, if I'm honest. The show was great. It was the first time I had ever seen a woman play drums, and I'm like, whoa, that's crazy. You know, as an 8th grader, like everything I thought about the world was just like shattering around me. Really bummed that I didn't see them when they were headlining the Collide record.
Collide's my jam. I listened to that today.
That was peak Skillet.
Did you really?
That's where April and I are at too. We
Very
talk
early
about that all
peak
the time.
Skillet right there. Yeah, now John Cooper is what, like selling books and like carrying guns around his neighborhood or whatever. Like,
we're determined to talk to John Cooper because he's a hack and he doesn't talk to anyone that's not going to like welcome his message.
Yeah.
And he dyes his hair for sure.
Yeah.
There's no way he doesn't. There's no way he doesn't dye his hair.
It's so perfect. Dude, you know what his hair reminds me? Remember on The Office when Creed like dyed his hair with the print toner?
Somebody took all the ink out of the printer and he just looks at the camera like, oops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's the vibe there. But yeah, I mean, like that Skillet has embodied that like that alternative culture where it's like, if you're a fan of Nirvana, you might like Collide. So you should listen to that Christian music over there instead of the secular, you know, coastal elites or whatever.
Yeah.
Dude, you know what's funny about that too is Skillet is so typical of so many things like in that youth group culture that we grew up in, where like you worry about this stuff all the time. Like all the time it's on your mind and you like fret about it and feel guilty and worry. And then like you have these little things that are kind of like a vacation from it, but they're safe, right? You're not going to get in trouble. Like this is a safe way for you to like just stretch your legs and forget about that for a second. And it always turns back into a lesson about Christianity. Like it always circles back. So like, you know,
Oh yeah.
you're gonna have a youth group night and you're gonna watch Lord of the Rings. Well, then you have to have this object lesson about Lord of the Rings and how it relates to Christianity, and you just feel like, man, can't we just have fun for a minute? Like,
Yeah.
can I just like listen to a rock album and not have to like hear John Cooper talk about like chastity or whatever?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. The
I
object
feel like I
lesson.
was.
We even had moments where like we would play an extra long game of ultimate frisbee, and somehow the youth pastor was able to like shoehorn in like, remember that epic catch from earlier? Like Jesus does the ultimate catch. Like,
Ah! Oh my
He's just a
god!
cool
remember when
guy.
Michael was like soaring through the air, diving for it in the end zone, and yeah,
Oh my god!
So relatable, Pastor Terry.
right. Yes, thank you.
Guys, how good is bacon? Am I right?
Thanks, man. Yeah. Man, the just the progression of Skillet, like from my early days to now, it really does. It's like that revealing agent of like, you were counterculture, quote unquote, for a while. Like you were so proud of like going against the mainstream, and you created your own culture in the process, but you refuse to call that your own culture that Jesus would probably be against too. Like like you
Did you?
created a whole structure and organization around the thing that Jesus was also critiquing in his ministry.
Yeah,
You
it's certainly ironic. The subculture is so frustrating, but the insulation of it is what I think is so aggravating. And of course, the insulation of like culture happens everywhere. So like, there are plenty of like people espousing liberal ideology that you know are all. It's just all a big like echo chamber of just like, yes, yes, that's amazing, and they only
Mhm.
listen to that. And like, and this is kind of a bit of a callback to what we talked about when Dan Koch was on. Is just like, how much information do you absorb from people you don't agree with? And it
Right.
doesn't have
Yeah.
to be equal, but it should be something. And if you are the kind of person who is refusing to absorb or listen to and think about information that doesn't make you naturally go, yes, I agree with that, then you're probably doing yourself a bit of a disservice. But so I'll critique that on the left, certainly, but um, on the right, I think, especially within evangelicalism, like what Casey was saying, like they have to be turning down interviews left and right to have meaningful conversations with people that are just like, can we talk about this? Because you're
Yeah.
spending a lot of time talking about what liberals and liberal Christians are like and how dangerous they are, but you refuse to actually have a conversation with them on any public platform as a public figure. And
Right.
that screams being disingenuous. It's like, goes back to that whole distrust thing. Like, you're building a cult following.
Well, and if we're being honest, it's just so much easier for John to do his like 4 minutes on Fox News than it would be spending 90 minutes with you guys. Like having a conversation about like, look, dude, I grew up in the exact same spot, like, but now I'm in a completely different place. So let's get to the root of like where our paths forked, like what brought me a different direction. It's just easier for him to not do that. Like the barrier to entry is so much higher
Yeah.
to
I'm
do
sure
like,
money and
Yeah.
fame has nothing to do with keeping him in his lane either. I'm sure.
hey man, he's got to sell books, right?
I feel like we were just talking about this whole thing the other day, and there is, even though he and April and I are both out of that culture, there's still an element of it. Like, I liked Skillet. I like some of those old albums still. I enjoy listening to it. And there's a part of you that like looks at what they're doing now. They're mainstream successful, obviously doing really well. They're on the radio all the time. There's a part of you that wants to be like, that's kind of cool that they made it,
They
like
did it.
they went that far. But he's just so awful. Like some of the things he says, it's like you can't even be happy for him.
Yeah, that's how it feels. Now he's
Yeah.
never going to come on. It's like the amount of shit we've talked about him on this at
Oh,
this point. It's
sorry.
like, he won't.
Oops.
No, this has been an ongoing conversation since we started this thing.
We'll
What
cut
are the
it
guys
out.
from
But
Pillar doing? Maybe they'll
Speaking,
come talk.
oh my God, Pillar, what a throwback, man. I got to tell you, so like in the same way Cutlass was like my band idol or whatever. You've name dropped him already, but like knowing that this is just both a humble brag and also like you guys are doing a really good podcast, because knowing that I'm going to show up in the same feed as John Steigard and Dan Koch, I'm like, I'm not worthy. This feels so weird.
Dude, you managed to fit in way more penis jokes than both of them combined.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, thank you. I take my bow then. Yes.
You are worthy. You are worthy.
Yeah. See, there's the narrative again, right?
Yeah, exactly. You sang too many worship songs to get you into that mindset before joining us here, I think, is the problem.
There you go. Yeah, because Hawk Nelson was my jam too. That and Disciple. I saw a show that was literally, the lineup was Hawk Nelson, Stellar Cart, Disciple, and Cutlass headlining, and it was like, it was a transcendent moment in my youth days. I was just like, they're all here in one room. It was wild.
Disciple was good. That self-titled album was my jam.
Scars Remain was the album that kind of broke me into just full-on metalcore. I started getting into like Haste the Day and August Burns Red after that, and I've never gone back since, if I'm honest. Like metalcore, metal music is like all I listen to. If it's my choice and like my wife isn't in the car because she can't stand the stuff, it's still all I listen to. And
I'm trying to get
a high percentage of it for me too.
I try to like put it on my kids every once in a while, but it's a little much for them. So it's not happening as much as I would like, but every once in a while, something that bridges that gap.
Sure.
They'll be
you got to get some
advance.
Clean vocals in there, repeatable hooky chorus.
Yep. Yeah. They'll get into it.
Absolutely.
Steven, why don't we get into you talking to us a little bit about the 12,000 podcasts you're doing?
12,000, yes. Divided by how many to get to the 3 I do.
It's hard enough for us to do 1. So the fact that you're doing 3 is pretty, that's a lot.
Yeah,
so
you're a hustler.
Yeah, you're going for it, man.
Podcasting is an art form that I'm so glad it exists. When I got my job here in Laurel, I work for a refinery here in town, like a drafting and design job. So it's a lot of desk work, and I have the tremendous freedom to basically, like, as long as I'm not ignoring engineers that have to come talk to me or like collaborating in a meeting or something, I can listen to whatever I want. So when I first started working this job, the first podcast I ever listened to was the Bad Christian podcast. Because I'd been following Emery forever, and I was like, what, they have a podcast now? Absolutely. I want to talk about that or listen to that. So binged like their entire back catalog, and then got current, and I've been listening to them and member of the BC Club ever since. But that kind of like awoke in me this love for this like audio medium where anyone can listen at any time. It's like basically like on-demand talk radio. Even the functionality of listening a little bit faster. I don't know about you guys. I listen to almost everything at 2x now. I'm just one of those crazy.
Dang, dude, you're trying to
Whoa,
get
that's
through.
a bridge I haven't crossed.
But I don't know. It's just something that I trained in myself. Eventually, you just want to be like, I want to listen to more shows. So I just got to like shrink it up a bit.
I only did ×2 speed in college, and I was trying to get through some of my online classes. It's the only time I've ever managed
to does the trick.
Get through things on ×2 speed.
Right. That does the trick. But so what Bad Christian kind of taught me was like, I just loved showing up every week to the 3 of those guys back when Joey was on the show. The 3 of them just like telling fun, entertaining stories about their life, and also getting into topics that I was becoming interested in. Like, if anything, Bad Christian is the most like, you can lay the most blame at their feet for my deconstruction process, because like I was pretty much following in parallel everything that Joey Svensson had questions about, especially regarding hell, like the nature of hell and eternal conscious torment and all that. I pretty much like was in step with him the whole time, and it just like, it kind of transformed the way I think. And that was one of those things where it's like, man, if podcasts can do this for me, like I love the idea of being on my own show. Like I've always kind of like fantasized about being on the Tim Ferriss show as well. I love the way that guy interviews people, and just the people he has on are just like endlessly fascinating to me. But I know like I'm not like a multi-million venture capitalist or angel investor or whatever, or like peak performer of anything, right? And I'm like, it's going to be forever. So I might as well just, what I wanted to do with my first show, No Normal People, was basically create this space for other people who also wanted to be interviewed like that, but that were like literal normal people like me. I just wanted to create a space where we can just like have conversations, get into whatever they want to talk about, kind of talk about the way they were raised, where they grew up, what their family was like, and just tell stories from their life, and then talk about whatever anyone is passionate about. So my wife and I named the show No Normal People, and our clever little artwork, it has KNOW but parentheses around the N and the O, so you can read it as like get to know normal people, but also that there are really no normal people once you're willing to have an in-depth conversation with someone, right? So like if you open up a podcast for 90 minutes, you get into all crazy stuff. We can talk about penis cages, or we can talk about our favorite metal music, right? And
Yeah.
and the way we grew up. So that's kind of what happened. We were gearing up to start that show at the end of 2019, and we released our first episode of 2020, and we were like, this will just go slow. We're going to do like a few episodes here or there. We really hadn't considered like putting any work into like, let's get this every week. Let's get the social media like tip top shape and all that kind of stuff. But then a global pandemic hits, and then you have a ton of free time.
Yeah. I think that's when the concept for this thing started, was like, hey, what about this?
Right.
Now we've talked about it before.
Yeah.
Now
there was a benchmark just before March of 2020 where the internet hit 1 million podcast feeds.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And just an absolute explosion in the market after COVID. Like everyone was like, well, shit, if we're already doing Zoom calls, we might as well record them, right? Let's do something. Yeah. So No Normal People was certainly born out of the pandemic, but it's a really fun excuse isn't the right word. It's just a fun space to create, to just have one person on at a time and get to know them. Sam, that's how you and I really got to know each other.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just a delight.
It was a great episode.
And really, oh, thank you. I got to talk about Sam's episode real quick. What has stuck with me the longest? Sam, we were talking about your family situation, especially with your foster son, because my wife and I are looking at we have our first interview with our caseworker in like a week.
Oh, awesome.
Care system here in Montana.
Good for you guys.
And so we were digging into that, and the thing that has stuck with me the longest that I have not been able to like get out of my head yet is the way you talk about almost reluctantly acting like a Christian because you're so convinced of like the person of Jesus and what that dude said, like regardless of whatever the church created it to be, like the way you read it is so convincing to you that you find it like I just can't even, I can't put it better than the way you put it, the way you just said, like
I don't even remember how I put it.
Well, you basically said like I'm almost doing it reluctantly. Like Jesus pretty much has to drag me through my life to like take on responsibility that, if I'm honest, I selfishly really don't want to take on.
Yeah, a lot of it had to do with never looking for. Like, I don't feel like I was ever looking for it. It was just like presented to me, and my ethic made me kind of forced me into saying yes. I was like, I guess so. But it's not to say that it's not like, and it ends up being worth it. And those are the moments in my life, or the times in my life where I've seen growth and change and been convinced that it, these are the good and right things to do, I guess. So,
and then you almost feel like a void or a little empty when, those certain chapters come to a close in your life and you're back to like, I have a ton of free nights and I'm just gonna
By the way, I'm at a point in my life where I would really appreciate some more free nights. So maybe when I get them, I can tell you that I miss responsibility. But
dude, so you're kind of like a Gimli type character. Like you're going to Mount Doom or whatever, but you're complaining the whole way.
Probably. That sounds about right. I'll take that Lord of the Rings reference. And I'll dwell on that for a bit now.
The Gimli archetype is one to explore for sure. I like the way you tied that, Casey. So yeah, that's No Normal People, and ultimately the message of No Normal People in that, like, I feel like it even has ties to the conversation we've had just now about indoctrination. Like, normal people can be part of a structure that might be perpetuating trauma and perpetuating issues, but like you really get to know them. It's like that trope of like, even if you have like ideological enemies, the work to put in is to love your enemies and like to humanize them. And really, what better way to do that than just have a conversation to get to know what makes them, like the way they grew up, like all sorts of structures that they grew up inside, and like what that has translated into like what they're passionate now. So we talk to a lot of people about like what they do for work, but also some people have podcasts, some people are doing like photo projects and all that. And it's just something that like I'm just looking for what makes people excited about their life, you know, whatever project that is. Cause I think that's just a humanizing thing. I almost take take inspiration as well from Dan Koch's Depolarize work, right? Like listening to those interviews of him trying to get to the bottom of like why evangelicals tipped so hard for Trump, and the way him, and especially in season 2 with Ellen Morrow, the way they were able to humanize Trump voters, I was like, this is sticky work. This is hard work, but I really am so convinced that this is like what the world needs, is to like hear from normal people and know what like makes normal people tick, as opposed to like listening to the people that are, you know, the artists or authors that are solely based out of like Austin or New York or LA, these like cultural epicenters that, you know, like I can only listen to so many Matthew McConaughey interviews before I know exactly what he's going to say. Right. So I do my work to pick and choose. Like I like the interviewer and I like Matthew McConaughey, but I don't need to hear him all the time, you know? So bringing something new to know normal people. And what that did was translate into now our podcast network we call the Highline Media Network, with under which my other 2 shows, Ravel and Whiskey Bench, land under. And we actually just signed a 4th show from my childhood best friend in Denver called the Into Podcast. Okay. And what we're trying to do is just highlight like we're normal people having conversations that matter, you know? So Ravel, like with my co-host Josh and Emily, we are digging into our past in American Christianity. And really it's less we're doing the work to research our topics. It's more like, you know, I've been really wondering about this thing this week, and we're just going to chase down wherever that thread goes. We heard a talk from Peter Rollins, the philosopher and theologian. Delicious Irish accent, by the way. We saw a talk from him that he dug into and revealed that basically the word ravel means the exact same as unravel. Like the is almost, it's just an unnecessary negative that we prefix onto the word ravel. So to ravel a sweater is to literally pull on a thread and see where that thread goes before you like start taking apart the sleeve or something like that. And what we liked about that image for that podcast was that, you know, like deconstruction can sometimes have a flavor of like, you know, we're just going to like set C4 charges at the foundation of the building and just watch it all crumble, you know?
Sure.
Whereas to ravel for us represents like, yes, we're still having the same conversations as a lot of like ex-evangelical Twitter is having or something like that. But we recognize that, you know, you pull apart the sweater by pulling on one thread, you still have the raw material to make something out of. You're just back to a ball of yarn. And the question is like, what do you want to make out of it after that? You know?
I think that's a great, we've talked about it quite a bit, you know, some of the areas where, you know, Sam and I've talked about, we don't really track with some of the deconstruction movement, is that like just fundamentally against Christianity or faith or religion as a whole, you know, after the fact. And like I think me personally, like I admire people who are able to like pick and choose the things that are important to them, that are, you know, uplifting and comforting and edifying to them, and keep those things and just discard all the stuff that's not important to them or that's harmful or that's not productive or doesn't line up with their worldview. Yeah. Like, I think that's great. That's probably the best way to do it. It's too late for me. I don't care anymore.
It's almost like someone we've read in the past talks about separating the wheat from the chaff, right?
Like this sounds familiar.
Yeah, finding the good stuff in among maybe the stuff that just needs to be burned off. Or
do you have any farm animal analogies?
Farm animal analogies?
Sheep and goats. Separate the sheep.
There
and
we go. Okay, I'm tracking with you.
Something like that. Yeah. Yeah. So that's what Ravel is, and again, it's highlighting. So Emily is an ordained Methodist pastor. She's actually pastoring a church out in Wyoming right now.
Okay.
So she's like the most, or the least rather, normal people on the Highline Network right now, because like she has a show talking about theology and she's a pastor. But I grew up with her, grew up going to high school. She was my first friend in high school that didn't go to my youth group. And when we met, I truly believed that it was impossible to be a Methodist Christian. Like I was like, you're not a Christian, you're just a Methodist. And that, like, in the same way, I really didn't think Catholics could be Christian
Yeah.
either. You know,
Yeah. We've gone down that whole rabbit hole a couple of times too. Yeah.
and we've discussed that on Ravel too. It's like, man, Emily, I really discredited everything that I thought like mainline Protestant Christianity was. You know, like you can't be that liberal and Christian at the same time. You know, so that's a good excuse for me to explore like all the preconceptions I was raised with, and man, just talking to my friends about theology is just an absolute blast. My third show, the Whiskey Bench, is with my friend Stephen Torna. He and I grew up in the same youth group. We were both homeschooled, and uh, we grew up in kind of separate cultures. Like his family is like a medical family, like right, like his dad is a doctor, and so like very much different backgrounds. But we were going to the same youth group, getting to know each other and all that. And he's just one of the guys that was like. One of my groomsmen in my wedding. He's just like one of those longest lasting youth group friendships that has kind of transcended the common touch point we had for a while that was youth group. And honestly, Whiskey Bench was born out of just an excuse for us to hang out some. So every episode we get on with our third co-host, Kat Dwyer. We get on, and actually I just met Kat in person for the first time since starting the podcast, like 30 episodes ago. She was just someone that Torna knew that he wanted to have on the show, because we knew we were going to kind of tailor the show toward discussing like culture and politics. So where Ravel definitely doesn't get all that political, Whiskey Bench is the place for us to dive into that. But we start a show with presenting a recipe for a signature cocktail. We talk about the drink, talk about his history, and just crack a couple other drinks open and just start talking politics and stuff.
There was a clip of that one on the episode that you did with Sam where he talked about like a Joe Biden signature cocktail.
Yep. The malarkey. Yep.
I can't remember what's in it. What was in it?
The running joke in that episode was that we were going to make a drink centered on flat Sprite. So the Joe Biden malarkey is just
simple
flat
syrup a little bit. No.
I mean, kinda, but yeah, it's just warm flat Sprite and hand mushed banana. No alcohol. We don't need to give Biden any alcohol, man. The guy has enough gas as it is.
I was gonna say you just do like ZQL and Metamucil stirred with like a hover around joystick.
Yeah, man. That show in particular has been teaching me a lot lately. When we first started the Whiskey Bench, I was honestly treating it more as like, I'm just going to hang out with friends and like shoot the shit. I kind of wanted it to be that because like Ravel definitely has a focus. So does No Normal People in interviewing other people. But I have gone through a transformation where basically like I realized that my co-host really wanted to talk about politics a lot more than I did. So I kind of came out of the gate on that show like, I don't really pay attention or care about politics all that much. And once they convinced me that I should, I realized that I was a lot more left leaning than I thought I was, especially being raised here in Montana. I'm like, oh man, I am living in the wrong city sometimes. But the common thread, especially amongst the three of us, it's like, if you're interested in politics from more of a libertarian mindset, we do find ourselves like tipping right or left. But we're the three of us are all kind of libertarian, depending on how you define that. But man, that one has been just teaching me so much. Again, it's just like normal people who have thoughts on politics, and for me, like because I'm still mostly politically agnostic, is the way I like to say it. I just learn a lot listening to other people and just asking the questions that are like genuinely curiosities for me, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
I don't do a ton of thinking about it. Casey, probably in the same way, you don't do a ton of thinking about theology anymore. Politics is not the way I go. Like if I'm thinking about anything, it's usually something about the Bible or the way the way we were raised in theology and what we can change about it. So
Yeah,
it's a great
I go
time,
down that road a good bit still too.
right? I mean, that's kind of the driving question for what No Normal People is like, what can you think and talk about when you have nothing else to think and talk about?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's great, man. I think you're doing some fun stuff. I like that you've turned into a network. Hope you continue to see some growth and success with those. I think you guys are doing some cool stuff. And I had a ton of fun doing No Normal People. I mean, if you're a normal person, you can do it. If you want to just talk to somebody about your thoughts and opinions, like I'm sure you get people who are just like, I have an idea, or I want to talk about this. And people just go to your website and sign up for it.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. If you go to highline.network and find the No Normal People page, there's literally a section where you can enter your email and say you want to be on the podcast and we'll get you on the schedule.
So there you go, listeners. If you want to show how normal you are and talk to this fun guy here, then you can
and ultimately prove that you aren't as normal as you probably think you are. I have so many people in DMs, like in prepping for interviews. I have so many people approach me and say like, thank you for asking, but like, why me? I feel like I'm so boring. And I'm like, aha, just wait for me to prove you wrong.
Yeah. Man, Steven, I don't know if you have any final thoughts before we sign off here. Anything else to throw out, anything else to plug, or if those just those podcasts is it?
Just those. I will say that the newest show on the Highline Network is one I'm really proud of. Is my childhood best friend, where he and I we were best friends. Like our parents were friends growing up there in Colorado, and we ended up moving to Iowa when I was like 4 or 5. So like 20 years later during the pandemic, I just reached out to him on Instagram. I'm like, hey, I don't know if you remember me, but like we used to be best friends, right? And we've started talking, and he's basically my operations arm of the network at this point, and he hosts the Into podcast on the Highline Network, where he talks with his best friend, his wife, and his parents about a lot of things like this.
Interesting.
And, man, especially that age diversity on that podcast is so cool to me. Just hearing multiple generations discuss ideas like 2 hours plus on the idea of consent.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Imagine talking about consent with your parents.
Yeah.
Just sit with that for a second. Alex is brave enough to do that, and it's awesome.
I like that concept a lot, man. If there's anything that's come up a lot since we've been doing this, it's that a lot of people haven't had these, I don't know about this, I'm not a Christian. Like sometimes people have gone in a far direction, just like, I've had to cut my parents out of my life completely. And then you have people who are like, I've still never told my parents that I think this way. And I don't think that for anyone really who grew up like that, starting a podcast with them is on their radar. So it's a bold move, and I'm sure it has a lot of interesting results.
It's very bold.
It's incredibly entertaining, and it's one of those, I just listen to it, and I just feel like it embodies that like normal people Highline network ethos, right? A lot of the shows that we're looking at even signing onto the network soon are a lot more conversationally based like this. Like pretty much what you guys are doing as well. Just you can have John Steigard on, and you can have Stephen Henning on. And I love the contrast of that. You're not just going for the big names, because like we all have a story to tell, right?
Yeah, certainly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
so
Steven,
people can find all of that. I'll just push them toward highline.network is the website. And if you're curious to hear my weird ramblings on Instagram or Twitter, I'm Stephen G. Henning on both Twitter and Instagram.
Well, we'll tag you on your Instagram when the podcast comes out, Twitter, if
Fantastic.
You do that whole thing. And then we'll put the...
I live most of my internet life on Twitter. I put most of my focus over there. Instagram is honestly kind of boring to me.
I'm getting into Twitter a little bit now that we've started with the pod. I'm kind of chiming in on stuff here and there, and it's fun. It's also a little bit exhausting. And when I think of how much certain people tweet, I'm like, how do you have this many thoughts to say about stuff all day long? Like, yeah. I'm like once a week kind of guy. And there's like, if they're not tweeting 10 times a day, it's like they're not succeeding at their Twitter goals. It's crazy.
Yeah, it can kind of feel that. Did you guys see the new Bo Burnham special that he put out on Netflix?
I didn't.
I keep hearing about it.
I heard so much about it.
He has a fantastic bit. You just reminded me of. He has a fantastic bit where he's like laying in his studio on a pillow, and he just sets the mic next to him, and just like eyes closed, he just goes on this rant, and basically it's like, can any of us just shut the fuck up for like 10 minutes, please? Like, do we need to constantly get our ideas out there? Which very funny, and at the same time, I take that to heart a little bit. I'm like, damn, 3 podcasts later, like maybe I should take some of that
Do I
advice
need to do
myself. Oops. Right.
Man,
Oh my
well,
God.
Steven, thanks so much for hanging out with us. This is a great time. Hopefully we'll, I plan on staying in touch. It's been fun getting to know you, and, this has been a good time.
Oh, it was a blast. Thanks again.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening, and we will catch you next time.